Hello, Robs. We're back with The Tiger in the House, the classic book on the history, manners, and habits of the cat by Carl van Vechten, originally written in 1920. This is a reissue from 1989 for Edna Kenton and Febez. I already read the introduction. The illustrations are thus. Take a minute to look at them. What about the whatever the hell it is? The contents, there you go. Take a look there, bruv. Really looking forward to this one. The cat and the occult and the cat and I can't read. Shouldn't have drank 2 beers, buddy. Chapter 1, by way of correcting a popular prejudice. Whenever this subject... All right, let's start over. Chapter 1, by way of correcting a popular prejudice. Whenever the subject comes up, and it may be said, speaking with moderation, that it comes up 40 times a day, someone invariably declares, "No, I don't like cats, I like dogs." The cognate dichotomous remark, which is equally popular, prevalent, and banal, is, "No, I don't like Dickens, I like Thackeray." That's me. As James Branch Cabell has conveniently pointed out for all time, to the philosophical mind it would seem equally sensible to decline to participate in a game of billiards on the ground that one was fond of herring. Nevertheless, both controversies continue to rage, and careless thinkers continue to force Dickens and the cat into categories. The dog lovers in the opposition sense, for it is really possible to care for both dogs and cats, just as it is possible to read Pendennis and Bleak House with equal delight, say of the soft puss that he is sly and deceitful, thieving and ungrateful, fickle and cruel, a friend to home and not to man. From this inconsiderate and unconsidered opinion, the derogatory and catachrestic adjective catty has been derived. Catachrestic adjective catty has been derived, an adjective which, when used in its ordinary accepted sense, I find particularly abhorrent, for who should be described as catty unless it be some gracious and graceful female, dignified and reserved, redolent of beauty and charm and the mystery of love? The cat lovers on their side so ardent, indeed, that in France they have earned the sobriquet of Philanophiles and Rajis, have not been guiltless. Affectionate, intelligent, faithful, tried, and true are some of the adjectives they lavish indiscriminately on their darling pets. It would seem, indeed, after reading some of the books, that cats spend their 9 lives caring for the sick, saving children from burning buildings, and helping Miss Jelby make small clothes for the heathen in Africa. Oh my God. Well, this guy did write a book called The N-Word in, what was it called? N-Word Heaven, which was actually a book favoring biracial relationships. But yeah, this guy doesn't have any filter from 1920. The cat himself might have settled the question long ago, had settling such matters been a part of the cat's purpose in life. You cannot reasonably expect a near relative of the king of beasts, whom he much more closely resembles, by the way, than a Japanese spaniel resembles a Newfoundland dog, an animal who has been a god, a companion of sorceresses at the witch's sabbath, a beast who is royal in Siam, who in Japan is called the tiger who eats from the hand, the adored of Muhammad, Laurel's revival with Petrarch, the friend of Richelieu's idle moments, the favorite of poet and prelate, to view the stupidity of humankind in regard to him with anything warmer than disdain. The cat, indeed, makes no advances. He cares for the hearth, and often he condescends to display affection to human friends, just as he has been known to entertain a vast liking for horses, parrots, and tortoises. But even in the most heated of such relationships, he preserves a proper independence. He stays where he likes to stay. He goes where he wants to go. He gives his affection where it pleases him to give it, when also it might be added, and he withholds it from those whom he deems unworthy of it. In other words, with a cat you stand on much the same footing that you stand with a fine and dignified friend. If you forfeit his respect and confidence, the relationship suffers. The cat, it is well to remember, remains the friend of man because it pleases him to do so, and not because he must. Resourceful, brave, intelligent, the brain of a kitten is comparatively larger than that of a child. The cat is in no sense a dependent, and can revert to the wild state with less readjustment of values than any other domestic animal. Therefore, he is easily enabled to determine his own end and purpose and to lead his own life. I love in the cat, said Chateaubriand to Madame de Marcellus, that independent and almost ungrateful temper which prevents him from attaching himself to anyone, the indifference with which he passes from the salon to the housetop. When you caress him, he stretches himself out and arches his back. Indeed, but that is caused by physical pleasure, not, as in the case of the dog, by a silly satisfaction in loving and being faithful to a master who returns thanks and kicks. I mean, that must have been a different time because most people try not to kick their dogs today. Anyway, the cat lives alone, has no need of society, does not obey except when he likes, pretends to sleep that he may see the more clearly, and scratches everything he can scratch. Buffon has belied the cat. I am laboring at his rehabilitation, and I hope to make of him a tolerably good sort of animal, as times go. Without some such guide, wait, let's see what that footnote is. Chateaubriand at son temps by the Comte de Marcellus. With some such guide to the nature of the most interesting of animals, it is impossible to approach the subject from any angle whatever. But with these few facts in mind, I must at once beg to insist upon a paradox. Stated simply, the case is this: each individual cat differs in as many ways as possible from each other individual cat. Any unprejudiced observer interested enough in cats to inspire their devotion will have found this out for himself if he has ever become acquainted with several cats at one time. Doubtless, there are seraph cats and demon cats as well, but the characters of most pussies lie somewhere between these intense blacks and whites. Cats differ so much, indeed, that some of them even lack the most generally distributed feline characteristics. It can be said of cats in general, however, that they are all independent, most of them amorous. Their love habits, inspired by the heartiest desires, are often supremely cruel. The theory of the American Shaker is that the functions of sex belong to a state of nature and are inconsistent with a state of grace is not held by the cat. And mystic. On this last point, there is little reason for doubt. Cats have gnosis to a degree that is granted to few bishops, as I shall attempt to show in a later chapter. As for their independence, it is simply the aristocratic quality of being natural. Cats do not force their attentions upon others, and they do not care to have attentions forced upon them. I would disagree with that. But when a cat is hungry or wishes to go out of doors, or has amorous desires, he plainly declares his feelings. Why not? Asked Colette's Kiki la Doucette. Why not? People do. These are inheritances of the wild life which the cat has never lost and never will lose. For in keeping with his royal brother, the lion, he also has a strong racial instinct which survives to be awakened when it is called. He has a longer memory than Mona Lisa. Yet, in the degree in which they react to these instincts, individual cats differ, and these differences are accentuated by treatment and by breeding. For cats inherit many traits, and although it almost seems unscientific to say so, there is strong evidence to the effect that they inherit acquired characteristics. You will find it stated in some of the books that a cat who has been deprived of her tail will occasionally produce tailless kittens. Many observers have recorded the eccentricities and idiosyncrasies of cats. Winter speaks of a cat of his who selected blotting paper on which to sit or lie. Meredith Janvir's Major Pussman contracted tuberculosis from sleeping on a hot radiator. Clara Rossiter describes a puss whose favorite occupation was to pull all the pins out of a cushion and lay them out on the table. And when the last was taken out, looking up into our faces with the most comical expression and making us understand she wanted them replaced. However, many times we stuck the pins in, she would pull them out. This cat also took pleasure in devouring flowers which she removed from the vases. The Reverend J.G. Wood tells us of a tomcat who was such an aristocrat that nothing would induce him, not even milk, when he was hungry, to put his head into the kitchen, or to enter the house by the servant's door. Winter had a cat who rose suddenly one day and sprang up the chimney, a fire burning in the grate all the while. A couple of 100 years earlier, the writer would have been burned for relating this incident. This cat would eat pickles and liked brandy and water. Lindsay mentions a cat with a fondness for porter, and Jerome K. Jerome writes of another who drank from a leaky beer tap until she was intoxicated. In a letter to Samuel Butler, dated December 24th, 1879, Miss Savage remarks, "My cat is taken to mulled port and rum punch. Poor old dear, he is all the better for it." Dr. W. B. Richardson says that the lower animals always refuse alcoholic drinks and gives that as a reason why humans should do so too. It is the popular belief that cats have an inherent dislike for water, and in general they are catabaptists, but my Ariel had no aversion to water. Indeed, this orange Persian puss was accustomed to leap voluntarily into my warm morning tub, and she particularly liked to sit in the wash hand bowl under the open faucet. Artaud de Vevey also had a cat, Isoline, who took baths jumping into the full tub. Cats are popularly supposed to dislike wet, writes Olive Thorne Miller, but I have seen two of them in a steady rain conduct an interview with all the gravity and deliberation for which these affairs are celebrated. There are innumerable recorded examples of cats swimming rivers to return to their old homes, and St. George Mivart tells us of a cat who plunged into a swiftly running stream and rescued her 3 drowning kittens, bearing them one by one to the shore. A writer in Chambers' journal recalls a dejected black cat who committed suicide by drowning. Fishing cats seem to be a commonplace. Lane quotes the Plymouth Journal in regard to a cat who was accustomed to dive for fish, and Ross writes of a Mr. Moody near Newcastle upon Tyne, who had a cat who caught minnows, eels, and pilchards in this manner. There is likewise the evidence of a celebrated Egyptian fresco in the British Museum which depicts a cat acting as a retriever. Shows us a gentle puss leaping into the Nile from a boat in order to fetch and carry the slaughtered duck back into the boat, an incident that G.A. Henty has woven into his tale for boys, The Cat of Bubastis. Certain cats of today find it natural to retrieve. My Ariel would run after a catnip mouse and bring it to me as often as I would throw it. C.H. Lane, Rabbits, Cats, and Cavies, page 239. The cat was named Puddles. He used to go out a fishing with me every night, relates the fisherman. On cold nights, he would sit on my lap while I was a fishing and poke his head out every now and then, or else I would wrap him up in a sail and make him lay quiet. He'd lay down on me while I was asleep, and if anybody came, he'd swear a good un. He'd swear a good un, and have the face off on 'em if they went to touch me. And he'd never touch a fish, not even a little teeny pout, if you didn't give it to him. I was obliged to take him out a fishing, or else he'd stand and yowl and mar till I went back and catched him by the pole and shied him into the boat, and then he was quite happy. When it was fine, he used to stick up at the bow of the boat and sit a-watching the dogfish. The dogs used to come along by the thousands at a time, and when they was thick all about, he would dive in and fetch 'em out, jammed in his mouth as fast as may be, just as if they were a parcel of rats, and he didn't tremble with the cold half as much as a Newfoundland dog who was used to it. He looked terrible wild about the head when he came out of the water with the dogfish. I larnt him the water myself. One day, when he was a kitten, I took him down to the sea to wash and brush the fleas out of him, and in a week he could swim after a feather or a cork. To the black cat who has it in mind to move, the chinchilla cat gives the following advice in Jerome K. Jerome's Novel Notes, page 147. Try and get yourself slightly wet. Why people should prefer a wet cat to a dry one, I have never been able to understand, but that a wet cat is practically sure of being taken in and gushed over, while a dry cat is liable to have the garden hose turned upon it, is an undoubted fact. Also, if you can possibly manage it, and it is offered you, eat a bit of dry bread. The human race is always stirred to its deeper depths by the sight of a cat eating a bit of dry bread. When visiting a friend in Patagonia, W. H. Hudson records in The Book of a Naturalist, I was greatly astonished one day on going out with a gun to shoot something, followed by the dogs to find a black cat in their company, and to see her, when I fired my first shot, actually dashing off before the dogs to retrieve the bird. One person observes that cats are always gentle and polite, that they eat their food daintily and never greedily, but I have watched otherwise good-mannered felines who could gobble and growl over their food with as much greediness and ill-manneredness as any dog. In the mere matter of the selection of food, cats vary as much as people. There are imperious, haughty, aristocratic cats who insist on being fed esoteric dishes in a certain fixed spot by certain people. Other cats resemble Lafcadio Hearn's little red kitten who ate beefsteak and cockroaches, caterpillars and fish, chicken and butterflies, mosquito hawks and roast mutton, hash and tumblebugs, beetles and pig's feet, crabs and spiders, moths and poached eggs, oysters and earthworms, ham and mice, rats and rice pudding, until its belly became a realization of Noah's Ark. What's the footnote of that? The little red kitten. Cats are exceedingly nervous, and they are not, as a rule, to be trusted in railroad trains, for the slightest sound or movement is likely to awaken terror, and fast-moving objects usually inspire them with the keenest sense of fright. But Avery Hopwood's orange tabby Persian Aberlard takes motor rides with him, sitting sagely on the front seat without a leash. When the car stops, he leaps out and walks about, ready to get back again. And when a start is agreed upon, let's go back to the footnote. Raoul Gannett has treated the subject in a poem which begins, En effet, Cooper matin pour cause de propate et par esprit de bonté, l'amour l'aurait rendu faux. Whatever the fuck that means. Theodore Hamaker, a flyer on the French front and in Palestine during the late war, took his black cat Brutus with him on his flights, the R-34, the first dirigible. To cross the Atlantic from England to America, carried the tabby cat Jazz as the only animal passenger. And I am acquainted with a eupeptic. Look at this. This is insane. I understand why people are a bit fear. Look at this. The whole page is French. If you can translate this in your French, please do. I was going to translate this using Google, but that's a lot of translating. I'll be there an hour doing that. And I am acquainted with the eupeptic, altered Tom Silver Persian who even goes to the movies on the shoulder of his mistress. Cats are popularly supposed again to prefer places to people, and there are literally thousands of recorded examples of cats who have surmounted every kind of physical obstacle in order to return to old homes from which they had been removed. It would be as easy to give as long a list of cats who move regularly with their families every year or so. A further list can be compiled of cats who move of their own accord, often from homes in which they are treated with every mark of respect, in which they are surrounded with every comfort and luxury. To those who feel that the recipient of attention should be grateful no matter in what form they come, this strange conduct of cats will seem inexplicable, but I am sure that some of my readers will understand that it is possible to desire something which has nothing to do with luxury or comfort. Occasionally, indeed, you will even find people who are willing to leave rich homes for the pleasures of adventure. The cat's winged, yearning journey, unrestrained over time and space, muses Gigi, the tomcat, and cats with longings in their souls invariably satisfy these longings so far as they are able. Carefully bred, tenderly nurtured Persian pussies have been known to leave the silks and satins of the drawing room for the free life of the rooftop in companionship with extremely ill-bred, low-spoken, short-haired females or felines. Spouse breach has been known to result. Other cats have left luxurious homes that take up a broader existence in a greengrocer's shop, where the hunting is better and there is less petting. The reverse often happens. A cat leaves a life of poverty to enter into a life of luxury. On the whole, however, I would say that cats pattern their lives more on that of May Yo than on that of Cinderella. To return to our text, it is undoubtedly true that there are perverse cats, just as there are perverse people who insist on residing in a certain spot. But these cats have a good instinctive reason for this obstinacy, and I shall show later, as I shall show later. Some cats make fond and zealous mothers, taking every care of their young, hiding them from danger, washing and feeding them, and teaching them to play. Alice's Dinah, whose method of washing her babies was to hold the poor things down by their ears with one paw, and with the other paw rub their faces all over, was an excellent mother. Some cats have such a strong instinct for motherhood that if their offspring is taken away from them, they suckle babies, leverets, and even rats. Other cats have been known to neglect or even to kill their young. One stolid young queen, probably having read Maupassant's Inutile Buttes, drowned her babies in a water butt. Another, refusing to suckle her kittens, or indeed to go near them at all, was shut up with them in a shed, whereupon she promptly put out their little lives with blows from her strong hind feet. When she was released, she walked out purring, evidently in a high state of relief and contentment. Cleanliness in the cat world is usually a virtue put above godliness. Puss spends more time washing than debutantes do changing their clothes, and her attention to Gulliverian hydraulics and other demands of nature is fastidious to a degree. In the cat state, Clarence Day Jr. quaintly observes, the plumber, the manicurist, and the soap maker would occupy the highest social positions. Preachers and lawyers the lowest. Nevertheless, Siamese and Russian short-haired blue cats have an odor, and I have seen cats of whatever color or whatever breed dirtier than any other animal could possibly be. A kitten once lived with me, a kitten in every respect, super intelligent who refused to systematize his toilet operations. He was a most amusing, adorably impudent, tailless kitten who followed me on the street one night in Paris. He walked closely behind me for a quarter of a mile when I put him, he was very tiny, into my pocket. He assented to the arrangement by purring loudly, but when together we ascended the steps of an omnibus, the conductor waved his hand grandly with the admonition, Pastel Betis. So with Puss in my pocket, I walked to my hotel. This cat had a delectable habit of springing on my shoulder in the dark when I returned home at night. Rubbing himself against my cheek, he purred like the kettle drums in Berlioz's Requiem. He was not impressed by the art of Franz von Stuck, and invariably, until I no longer fastened it up, he succeeded in wresting an engraving of Salome from the wall, although it was pinned very high and no article of furniture underneath offered assistance in the operation. This puss also had a mania for breaking dishes, and there was no leaving tea things around in his presence. Like all cats, he could alight on a full table of such knickknacks without upsetting anything. But once landed, he delighted in disturbing the equilibrium of the porcelain with his nimble and roguish paw. These qualities did not alienate my affections. Quite the contrary. We quarreled irrevocably over another matter about which Puss, as cats always are, was inexorable and paramount. He refused to learn the uses of a box of sand. Claudine Fanchette was irreproachable in this respect. Colette Wiley observed her one day and set down her observations with such truth and good humor that I cannot resist the temptation to quote the passage from Claudine à Paris. And there you go. He refused to learn the uses of a box of sand, nor would a sheet of paper or sawdust tempt him, not even Le Temps or Les Journaux with the reviews of Catulle Mendius. This guy's a real literature, man. There's no one thing that cats are supposed to care more for than heat. And it is true that a cat will seek hearth, a cozy wood fire, or the companionship of a kitchen stove. Well, it's perfectly possible for a cat to exist in the cold. When it was discovered that the extremely frigid temperatures of the great cold storage plants was not sufficiently bitter to exterminate the sturdy rats and mice, someone proposed the introduction of cats. The first felines carried into these bleak quarters did not thrive. Some of them, indeed, perished, but a few survived, and after a winter or two grew an astonishing coat of fur, as thick as that of a beaver. The kittens born in this ice-like temperature were hardy little beasts, and it is said that now the cold storage cats would pant and languish with nervous exhaustion were they exposed to a New York July day. There is a feud between the cat and the dog, but this dislike is superficial and can, in most instances, be easily set aside. It is, to be sure, instinctive. Kittens, with their eyes scarcely open, have been known to spit at a dog, but cats who live with dogs usually do so with dignity and ease. In many cases, a deep affection springs up between the two. When Flecknose's miserable old gentlewoman, in his enigmatical characters, speaks of letting her prayer book fall into the dripping pan and the cat and dog quarreling over it, and at last agreeing to pray on it, she becomes, in a sense, symbolical. You may likewise remember, oh man, old Mother Hubbard went to the Hatter's to buy her dog a hat, but when she came back, he was feeding the cat. Mademoiselle Antoinette Therese Descholets wrote a remarkable heroic tragedy, after the manner of Corneille, the subject of which is the passion of Madame de Choleau's cat Grisette, for Cochon, the dog of the Duc de Vivonne, brother to Madame de Montespan. The play is called La Mort de Cochon, and all the ram cats of Madame de Choler's household and the neighborhood have gathered on a convenient rooftop to rejoice at the news conveyed by the title, and to express the hope that one of them may win the paw of the perverse grisette. That young lady, however, gives herself wholeheartedly to grief. In vain the chorus of cats cries, Rendez-vous à votre espèce, votre destin sera plus douce. Grisette replies, Je dois, aujourd'hui. This isn't accurate, so if you're listening, Je dois aujourd'hui mes tendresses, tu veux, et tu encore mille fois joiblable, je bois, vos cerises, blah, 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 blah. The chorus cries, Courage, chat, arrêts. But she does not relent and disappears from the rooftop to make way for Eros, the god in the car, who holds out the following hope. Tendres matus, lazid la fe, votre infortune finira. Je ne joue par mon or, je ne joue par ma mère. La Constance est une chimère, dont Grisette si Lazare. Through the convenient pen of Madame de Choleries, Grisette and Cochon had previously penned a long correspondence. It is perhaps the first literary friendship between a dog and a cat, but by no means the last. Indeed, a cat prefers, in most cases, a dog for a companion rather than another cat. A mother cat will suckle puppies, and she has been known to suckle rats. For rats and cats, too, can become friends, as Theophile Gautier discovered when his dynasties of white rats and white cats were contemporaries. And we shall stop there because I'm going to. Because I said so, young man. Young bruvs. Wow, what a read that is. All right, bruvs, that's all. What a book. What a book. The French is indeed off-putting for us who don't speak French and English, but there you go. Goodbye. Goodbye.